Hey guys, Dr. Joel here. Welcome to a talk on the immune system. Okay, this is Understanding the Basics Part 1. Guys, I want to get into some very basic things. We're going to do a little bit of an overview of some very key components of the immune system. And if you can understand these key components, it's going to make a lot more sense if you have any kind of immune system issue. Maybe you get sick all the time. Maybe you have a ton of inflammation. Maybe you have food sensitivities. Maybe you have an autoimmune condition. These are going to help explain some of the basics and hopefully give some understanding there. So let's jump into it. We have T helper cells. Okay, these helper cells are they play a huge part with your immune system. And these T helper cells, we're going to talk about 3 here today. There are more, but we're going to only talk about 3. And essentially, these cells are made in your bone marrow, but they're matured in your thymus. Okay, the thymus is a little gland that sits kind of right under your sternum bone, right here in your chest, and it causes these cells to mature. Okay, so you have a Th1 group here. These T helper cells 1. These cells are going to be increased and react and be more activated when you have bacterial infections, when you have a fungal issue with the immune system, when you have a viral infection like a cold, okay? So when we talk about, getting sick, we talk about some kind of a cold. What we want to talk about is making sure your Th1 system is supported. Okay, so we'll talk more specifically with each of these things as far as what is going to impact them and affect them in other videos. But to give you just some brief insights, anything that happens in regards to Th2 is going to suppress Th1. So if you have a nasty food sensitivity, heavy metal issue, vaccine reaction, parasites, and you always get sick with viruses and bacteria and all those different things, the issue is probably with the Th2 part of your immune system. Okay, now if you just have an issue with Th1, you always get sick, in general you're always getting colds and things like that, chances are you need support there. So some very basic support for Th1. My 3 favorites, vitamin D, vitamin A, and an herb called astragalus. Those are probably my 3 favorites there. There are other things that can support like echinacea and things like that. Vitamin E is another one, but those are my 3 favorite there. Many people have done a lot of different research throughout the recent years with everything that's happened with COVID, and a lot of people recommend melatonin. Well, I don't recommend melatonin for your immune system, and I don't recommend it for sleep unless it's for literally 1 or 2 nights. But essentially you have melatonin being recommended because it supports the Th1 part of your immune system. And so that's kind of why that's going on there. We have the Th2 part of your immune system. Okay, if you have any kind of food sensitivities, that's the Th2 part of your immune system going up, becoming activated, stimulated, hopefully addressing whatever issue is there, and then balancing back out. Now, oftentimes with food sensitivities, as long as you're still eating those foods, your Th2 is going to continue to be stimulated, and you may continue to have different kind of issues with that. Parasite infections is going to stimulate Th2 response, heavy metals, and then whenever you react to a vaccine, this part of your immune system is what's going to become hyperstimulated as your immune system is triggered to make basically these memory cells. All of that goes through your Th2 immune system. And so while that's the case, a lot of times because of the different adjuvants and different things added to these vaccines, you can have a Th2 response that becomes hypervigilant. Essentially, it is too much. And once it stays up there for a while, it can lead to a lot of inflammation and things like that. The Th2 is the type of response and issue that we come across with in so many different conditions. A lot of times we're coming across this with things like fibromyalgia, where people just have pain and achiness everywhere. Of course, when someone has a food they're reacting to, we come across a Th2 issue, heavy metals, and so forth. Now, I mentioned a little bit ago, and I'm going to jump to this next screen here. If you have any kind of imbalance with one of these, the Th1 or the Th2, it's going to cause an imbalance with the other one. They're supposed to work in tandem together. You have a virus, Th1 goes up, takes care of it, kind of comes back down, and your immune system's balanced again. if you have some kind of issue with the Th2 response, heavy metal toxicity, something like that, it's very common for that Th2 to go up. And during that time, if your body's not able to take care of it quickly, you may notice that all of a sudden you have issues with getting cold, getting a cold, getting a bacterial infection or a viral infection or something like that. So these two work together kind of like a seesaw, whereas when one is activated and stimulated, normally the other one is somewhat suppressed a little bit, and vice versa there. So that's really important to understand when we talk about some of these issues, because oftentimes I see a lot of patients that continue to get sick. Maybe they constantly have bacterial infections, especially little kids. And when we're working through things, it's very common that they don't need an antibiotic. They don't need any Th1 support necessarily at all. They need Th2 to become balanced out. They need the food sensitivities to be addressed. They need the immune system to be balanced from any adverse reactions and so forth. So it's really important to kind of understand those topics there. Now, Th17, this is your autoimmune response with your immune system. So any autoimmune condition, whether it's Hashimoto's, whether it's lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, Sjogren's, scleroderma, you name it, the list goes on and on. Essentially, when your immune system has this reaction where your cells are attacking your own system, the Th17 response is what's going on there. Now, in balancing all of these out, right, you want to be able to figure out kind of what's going on with these. And I mentioned a couple things with Th1 that can support with that. Th2 support is going to be fairly different. Vitamin A and vitamin D can be helpful, but oftentimes you'll find things like green tea extract that's decaffeinated can be helpful with that. You can find things like maybe a grapefruit seed or quercetin, things like that can really help support and kind of balance out that Th2 response. Now, when it comes to this Th17, a lot of times you want to figure out what's going to support interleukin 10, and that's going to be covered in part 2 of this video. But essentially, you have to figure out the trigger with the Th17. Is there an infection? You can have a bacterial infection trigger an autoimmune response. You can have viruses and fungus do the same. You can have food sensitivities lead to autoimmune responses. We see that a lot with things like Hashimoto's. You can have heavy metal toxicities, and even vaccines and parasites contribute to these different responses. So you always you want to figure out the trigger. That can take, you really have to take a holistic kind of approach with that in order to understand that. And of course, if you have any kind of a holistic technique like systems healthcare, that sure goes a long way with things. But then you also have to figure out what's going to support what we call the Treg cells. That's also in part 2. And interleukin 10. Those two things help calm the immune system, help control the immune system, and help it to regulate itself better. So just a couple of terms here that I wanted to mention and kind of talk about. You'll hear me talk about these often, and this might be a good resource for you to just kind of understand a little bit more about these and just kind of have a better idea of kind of what I'm talking about. So again, this was meant to be just an aerial overview, just kind of get your toes wet a little bit and so forth. So guys, find us online at these other social medias, Instagram, Facebook, X, which used to be called Twitter. Feel free to schedule with us. You can book a free 20-minute phone consult with myself. Schedule your first visit. We'd love to see you. Guys, reach out if you have any questions, leave a comment. I'm glad that you were able to make it for this video. I hope you got something from it, and I'm thankful for the opportunity. Thank you guys. We'll see you in the next one.